Darius Cole was 44 years old, and until the night he found a stranger's watch on his own nightstand, he believed he had built something worth keeping. 18 years of marriage, a 4-bedroom house in suburban Atlanta, a design firm he financed from the ground up with his own salary, his own credit, his own discipline. He wasn't loud or flashy. He was an engineer, a man who built things to last. Patricia knew that when she married him. She counted on it when she started planning her exit. By the time she walked out of that courthouse without looking back, she had taken the house, both cars, the investment accounts, and the business he funded. She left him a studio apartment and a cardboard box. She believed she had calculated every asset, accounted for every number, stripped him down to nothing. What she never knew, what she couldn't have known, was that somewhere in a jacket pocket he hadn't touched in months, folded inside a gas station receipt, was a lottery ticket. And 3 months after that divorce was finalized, Patricia was watching the evening news when she saw Darius Cole's face on her television screen, standing behind a $750 million check. She reached for her phone immediately. She had no idea what she had already set in motion. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. The key turned in the lock the same way it always did. A little stiff, a little resistant. Darius Cole had told himself for 2 years that he was going to fix that lock. He never got around to it. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The house was dark. Not the comfortable dark of someone asleep early. The cold, empty dark of a space that had been without people for hours. No television murmuring from the living room, no smell of food, no movement anywhere. Just the faint hum of the refrigerator and the low tick of the hallway clock that Patricia had picked out at an estate sale 4 years ago and insisted was charming. Darius set his bag down by the door and stood still for a moment. He was good at being still. It was one of the things he did without thinking. Stop. Take in the full picture. Assess before acting. It was the same instinct that made him a careful engineer and a careful husband. He reached for the light switch. The living room came up slow and familiar. Patricia's design touches were everywhere. The cream linen sofa she'd reupholstered twice, the gallery wall of framed geometric prints, the low oak coffee table with the single orchid on it, always white, always fresh. She had genuine talent. He had never doubted that. He'd spent $40,000 financing the first year of her design firm because he believed in it, in her. He still believed in the talent. He was no longer sure what else he believed. He checked his phone. No messages. He called her number. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. Her recorded voice, professional and smooth, the voice she used for clients. "You've reached Patricia Cole Interiors. Please leave a detailed message, and I'll return your call within 1 business day." He hung up without leaving one. The refrigerator held leftover rice, a half-empty bottle of white wine, and condiments. No dinner in progress. No indication dinner had been considered. He had texted her from the airport 3 hours ago. She had read it. He could see the small read confirmation sitting beneath his message like a quiet accusation. He wasn't hungry anyway. Darius moved through the house the way he always did when he came home from a work trip, checking it the way an engineer checks a structure, out of habit, out of love for the thing. He had built this life the same way he built everything else, carefully, load-bearing piece by load-bearing piece, over 18 years. The 4-bedroom colonial in Decatur had been his idea. The neighborhood was stable. The school district was good, even though the children they had planned for never came. The mortgage was paid off 2 years ahead of schedule because Darius ran numbers the way other men ran playlists. Constantly, almost unconsciously, always optimizing. He walked past the framed photo on the hallway credenza. Him and Patricia at somebody's wedding. 7 years ago, maybe 8. She was laughing at something. He was looking at her, laughing. He remembered that day clearly. He remembered thinking, This is the thing I'm protecting." He stopped looking at the photo and kept moving. The home office was how he'd left it. His drafting notes stacked on the corner of the desk. A coffee mug he hadn't washed before leaving. But Patricia's side of the desk had changed. A folder he didn't recognize. A yellow sticky note in her handwriting with a name and phone number he didn't know. And beneath the folder, partially visible, not hidden, just carelessly uncovered, a document he had seen before. The business restructuring paperwork. She had first brought it to him 6 weeks ago, calmly, over dinner, slipping it into the conversation between talk of a client project and a neighbor's renovation. She wanted to restructure the ownership split of Patricia Cole Interiors. Currently it was 50-50. He owned half, a reflection of the fact that his capital had funded every early year of the business. She wanted to move it to 80-20 in her favor. She said it was about liability, about the firm's professional classification. She had a reason for everything. She always did. He had not signed it. She had asked again 2 weeks later, then again the week before he left for this trip. Each time the language got a little more urgent, and the explanations got a little more layered. Each time, Darius said he wanted to have his accountant look it over first. Each time, something moved behind her eyes that she covered quickly with a smile. He left the folder where it was. He climbed the stairs slowly, one hand trailing the banister. The bedroom door was open. He pushed it wider and reached for the lamp on the dresser, and warm yellow light spilled across the room. The bed was made. Patricia's perfume still hung faintly in the air. Her jewelry box sat on the dresser, closed. Her reading glasses were folded on the nightstand beside a library book she'd had for 3 weeks. And on his nightstand, his side, where his phone charger lived, and the thriller novel he'd been working through for a month, sat a watch. A man's watch, silver-banded, heavy-looking, not his. Darius stood very still and looked at it for a long time. Darius picked up the watch. It was heavier than it looked. The kind of weight that comes from real metal, real craftsmanship. A silver bracelet band, a dark blue face. No brand name visible from the front, so he turned it over. The caseback was engraved. 2 initials and a date. FB 2019. He set it back down on his nightstand. Then he picked it up again. Then he set it down again. He sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. Not because he was frozen, not because he couldn't move. He sat because he was doing what he always did, taking in the full picture before he acted. The watch was not an accident. A man careful enough to engrave his initials on a watch was not careless enough to leave it somewhere by mistake, which meant it was left on purpose, or left by someone who felt comfortable enough not to worry about it. Both answers told him something. Neither answer was good. He breathed once, slowly. Then he stood up. The shared tablet was on Patricia's nightstand, plugged in, screen dark. They had bought it 2 years ago to share recipes, travel itineraries, that kind of thing. Practical. Domestic. He picked it up and pressed the home button, and the screen came alive, asking for a passcode. He typed in her birthday. Force of habit. It opened. Patricia had always been careful with her phone. Her personal phone had a passcode he didn't know, and a face lock on top of it. She guarded that phone the way some people guard a diary. But the tablet she had stopped thinking about. People always forgot the secondary device. They secured the thing in their hand and left the door open on everything else. Her iCloud account was synced directly to it. Messages, photos, notes, all of it. He opened the Messages app. There were dozens of conversations. Her mother, a few clients, a group thread with some women from her alumni chapter. He scrolled past all of it until he found the name, Foster Briggs. The thread was long. Months of messages, going back almost 2 years. He opened it and started reading from the beginning. What he found was not the shock of discovering an affair. He had already understood, on some quiet and unexamined level, what the watch meant. What hit him differently, what moved through him like cold water finding the cracks in a structure, was the planning, the calculation, the sheer amount of deliberate, patient work that had gone into what he was reading. It started as flirtation, professional at first. Foster mentioning a design project, Patricia responding with her client voice. Then warmer. Then something else entirely. By month 3 of the thread, the flirtation was gone, and something more honest had replaced it. By month 6, the messages read like a partnership between two people who had already decided on the destination and were comparing notes on the route. He still hasn't signed the restructuring docs, Patricia had written 8 weeks ago. He keeps saying he wants his accountant to review it first. I told him it was just a liability thing. Foster's response, "How long can you stall the filing?" "Long enough. The business is practically already mine on paper. I just need the formal split adjusted before we move." Darius read that sentence twice. His jaw tightened. He kept reading. Further back, 6 months ago, Patricia had written, "I looked into it. If we file before the anniversary in November, the joint account is treated differently. The timing matters." Foster, "So file before November. What does your attorney say?" Patricia, "She's ready when I am. I just need the asset list finalized. I need everything to look clean." There were more. Messages about the house, about the investment account, about the design firm. Patricia had built a map of everything they owned together and had been quietly calculating for months how to walk away with most of it. She had done it calmly. She had done it while eating dinner across from him, while asking how his projects were going, while sleeping beside him. Darius sat with the tablet in his hands and felt something settle in his chest. Not grief, not yet. Something older and quieter than grief. A man finally seeing the full shape of a thing he had been refusing to look at directly. He went to the tablet's screenshot function and started at the beginning of the thread. He worked methodically. Every relevant message, every exchange about the business, the accounts, the timing of the filing. He forwarded the screenshots to his personal email, the one Patricia didn't know about, a backup account he used for engineering licenses and professional certifications. Then he went to the sent folder and deleted the outgoing message. He cleared the screenshot album. He closed the Messages app, returned to Patricia's home screen, and set the tablet back on her nightstand exactly as he had found it. Plugged in, screen dark. He washed his hands in the bathroom sink. He didn't know why. He just did. He went downstairs and found his phone and scrolled to a contact he hadn't used since the business restructuring had first come up. He had added Simone Wade to his phone after their one prior consultation, just in case. He had hoped just in case would never come. He pressed call. It rang twice. Then, "Simone Wade, this is Darius Cole. I know it's late. I need a morning meeting." A brief pause. Then, 7:30, my office. Bring anything you have in writing." That was all. No questions, no softness. He appreciated that about her. He hung up and went to the kitchen. He found the legal pad he kept in the drawer beside the stove, the one he used for grocery lists and contractor notes and the small mathematics of a functioning household. He sat down at the table Patricia had picked out at a West Elm sale 3 years ago. Under the pendant light she had rewired herself because she didn't trust the electrician to match the fixture, and he opened the legal pad to the first clean page. He wrote the date at the top. Then he started writing everything down. The watch, the tablet, the messages, the dates, the exact wording of what she had written, the names, the numbers. He wrote it all in his small, precise handwriting, the same way he documented a structural survey, without emotion, without editorializing, just fact after fact in careful sequence. The pen moved steadily across the page, while the refrigerator hummed, and the hallway clock ticked, and the house sat dark and quiet around him. Outside, Atlanta went about its night. Cars moved on distant streets. Somewhere, a dog barked once and went silent. Darius kept writing. The first gray light of morning was just beginning to press against the kitchen windows when he finally set the pen down, turned to a fresh page, and wrote 2 words at the top. She planned. He stared at those words for a moment. Then he underlined them. Then he kept going. Simone Wade's office was on the 14th floor of a glass building in Buckhead. Clean lines, minimal furniture, the kind of space that said, "I win cases," without saying anything at all. She was already at her desk when the receptionist brought Darius in at 7:28. She was reading something. She didn't look up immediately. When she did, she gestured to the chair across from her without preamble. "Sit." Darius sat. He placed the legal pad on the desk. Beside it, he set a printed folder. He'd stopped at a FedEx office at 6:15 that morning and printed every screenshot from his email, 41 pages. He had organized them chronologically and paper-clipped them by subject: the affair, the business strategy, the divorce timing, the asset language. Simone pulled the folder toward her and started reading. She didn't say anything for a long time. She turned pages the way a surgeon moves. No wasted motion. Complete attention. Once, she stopped and went back 2 pages, reading something a second time. Her expression didn't change. When she finished, she closed the folder and rested her hands flat on top of it. "She used the word clean," Simone said. "Page 12, Darius said. "And again on page 27. Simone nodded slowly. "She's been coached. Or she's smart enough not to need coaching." She paused. "Both are possible." "She's smart," Darius said. "Don't underestimate her." Simone looked at him. "I don't intend to." She leaned back in her chair. "Here's what I need you to understand. These messages are significant, but messages are not a financial case. If she files and her attorney comes in with clean documentation, valuation reports, ownership records, structured asset lists, a judge looks at paper, not at what your wife said to her boyfriend 8 months ago. She let that land. We need the financial picture. Every joint account, every statement, every business record you can access legally, before she moves anything. How long do I have? That depends on when she plans to file. Based on the November deadline she mentioned, Simone glanced at the folder. You have weeks, not months, maybe less. Darius nodded. He had already known this. Hearing it stated plainly just compressed the timeline into something he could work with. Don't confront her, Simone said. Don't change your behavior at all. You go home tonight, and you are exactly who you were yesterday. Can you do that? Darius thought about the watch on his nightstand. He thought about 41 pages of planning conducted from inside their shared bedroom. Yes, he said. I can do that. He could do that. It turned out to be the hardest thing he had ever done, and he did it without flinching. Patricia came home 2 days after he'd found the watch. She said she'd been staying with a friend from the alumni chapter, a thing she had done before, enough times that he'd stopped questioning it. She came in, set her bag down, kissed his cheek, and asked what he wanted for dinner. He said whatever she felt like making. She made pasta. They ate at the West Elm table. They talked about a renovation project one of her clients had approved. He asked follow-up questions. He poured her more water when her glass got low. She noticed nothing. He spent 3 evenings that week at his desk, pulling records, joint checking, joint savings, the investment account. He had legal access to all of it. His name was on every account, even the ones Patricia primarily managed. He printed statements going back 18 months. He found what he was looking for in the business records. The design firm's vendor accounts had been quietly restructured. Several of the longer-term client contracts had been reassigned into Patricia's sole proprietor operating account. The shared business account had been drawn down steadily. Small withdrawals, consistent, the kind of pattern that looks like operating expenses until you lay it all out in sequence. He organized the documents the same way he organized the screenshots, chronologically, by subject. He drove them to Simone's office on a Thursday afternoon and left them with the receptionist. Patricia filed 11 days later. Her attorney was a man named Gerald Cross, polished, expensive, and well-prepared. The documentation he submitted valued the design firm at $180,000. Simone had already told Darius what to expect from the number, and Darius had already told Simone what he wanted to do about it. Nothing. Not yet. The cost of fighting on those terms, against that documentation, in that timeline, was a battle designed to exhaust him. Patricia had timed it that way. He signed where they told him to sign. He signed over the house, the cars, the investment accounts. He walked out of the dissolution of 18 years of his life, carrying a small box of personal items and a framed photo of his mother, because those were the only things he had asked to keep. Outside the courthouse, the Atlanta sun was bright and indifferent. Darius put on his sunglasses and stood on the steps and watched the doors. Patricia came out behind Foster Briggs, who had his hand at the small of her back. She was saying something to her attorney. She laughed at something Foster said. Then the doors swung shut behind them, and they moved down the steps, and she never once turned around. The boxes were already on the porch when Darius pulled up. 6 of them. Banker's boxes, the kind with lids, each one labeled in Patricia's handwriting with a black marker. Darius, books, Darius, tools, Darius, misc. She had sorted his life into categories and stacked them by the front door like he was an account she was closing out. The locks were new. He could tell by the brightness of the brass. He loaded the boxes into the back of the rental car without rushing. The neighbor across the street, an older man named Walt, who had waved to Darius every Saturday morning for 11 years, watched from his driveway and then went inside without waving. Darius didn't blame him. Nobody knew what to do with someone else's loss. He drove away and didn't look in the rearview mirror. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building off Cascade Road, 600 square feet. 1 bedroom, 1 bath, windows that faced a parking lot. The carpet was a shade of beige that suggested it had been cleaned many times without ever truly recovering. Darius paid the first month and deposit in cashier's checks, signed the lease, and carried his boxes up in 2 trips. He slept on an air mattress for the first week. He bought a real bed on the 8th day, nothing expensive, just something with a solid frame that didn't move when he shifted. He bought a small kitchen table, 2 chairs, a lamp. He did not buy a television stand, so the small TV he picked up from a Goodwill sat on a cardboard box pushed against the wall. He left it that way. It didn't bother him. The routine rebuilt itself the way routines do when you give them enough structure to grip. He was at the office by 7:15 every morning. He ate lunch at his desk. He stayed late when the work required it, and left on time when it didn't. He cooked most nights, simple things, rice and chicken, eggs, soup from a can when he was too tired for the rest of it. He paid Simone's invoice in installments, each one on time, each one noted in the running ledger he kept in the back of his legal pad. Wendell called every Sunday, not to talk about Patricia, or the divorce, or what came next, just to call. Sometimes they talked about basketball. Sometimes they talked about an engineering project Darius was working on. Sometimes one of them said something that made the other laugh, and then they'd sit on the phone for a few seconds, not saying anything, comfortable in the quiet the way men are when they've been friends long enough. It was good. Not happy, exactly, but solid. A man could stand on it. 6 weeks after he moved in, he unpacked the last box. He had been putting it off without deciding to. The box was labeled Darius, Misk, and it sat in the corner of the bedroom accumulating the kind of patience objects have when they know they'll eventually be dealt with. On a Saturday in November, he finally pulled it open. Work gloves, a phone charger for a phone he no longer owned, a birthday card from 3 years ago he didn't remember saving, a sport coat he hadn't worn since a client dinner in the spring, charcoal gray, slightly too formal for most occasions, bought on sale from a department store in Perimeter Mall. He checked the pockets out of habit. Right pocket, empty. Left pocket, a folded gas station receipt. And tucked inside the receipt, flat and a little soft at the corners, a lottery ticket. He held it up to the light from the window. Georgia Mega Millions, 6 numbers. A date in October, the Tuesday before the divorce was finalized. He remembered the moment vaguely. He had been filling up a rental car after a site visit in Marietta, standing at a BP pump in the early evening, the sky going orange over the tree line. The woman ahead of him in the checkout line had bought 2 tickets, and he had thought, for no particular reason, why not? He had given the clerk $2 and taken the ticket without looking at it. He almost dropped it into the trash bag hanging from the kitchen cabinet. Instead, he set it on the counter next to the coffee maker. He wasn't sure why. 2 weeks passed. He forgot about it and then didn't. The way you half remember something sitting in the edge of your vision. On a Tuesday night in late November, he woke at 2 in the morning and couldn't find his way back to sleep. He lay still for 20 minutes, then gave up and went to the kitchen. He drank a glass of water standing at the sink. The ticket was there on the counter where he'd left it, still folded inside the receipt. He sat down at the kitchen table with his laptop, found the Georgia Lottery website, clicked on winning numbers, pulled up the archive and found the October draw date. He checked the first number, then the second. He made himself slow down after the third. He read each digit carefully, the way he read engineering specs. No assumptions, no rushing, just the number in front of him and the number on the screen. 6 numbers. 6 times he looked from the ticket to the screen and back. 6 matches. Darius sat completely still on his couch for a long time. The apartment was quiet. The parking lot lights made pale rectangles on the ceiling. He didn't move. Then he picked up his phone and called Aunt Odessa. She picked up on the second ring. Darius. Her voice was alert in the way old people get when they've learned not to sleep too deeply. Not alarmed. Just ready. Aunt Odessa. He stopped. Tried again. I need to tell you something. Then tell me. So he did. He said it plain, the way she'd always taught him to say hard things. No build-up, no cushion, just the truth laid out flat where both of them could look at it. He told her about the ticket. He told her about the numbers. He told her the jackpot figure. The line went quiet. Not the quiet of someone who hadn't heard. The quiet of someone who had heard too much all at once and was letting it settle before they trusted their own voice. Then Odessa said, "Baby, God don't play." She said it soft, like a woman saying something she'd known for years and had just now been handed the proof. He exhaled. Something in his chest loosened by a degree. "Okay," she said, and her voice shifted. The softness pulled back and something firmer came up beneath it. "Now you listen to me. Don't you tell a single soul until you talk to a lawyer. Not one. Not Wendell. Not anybody from that job. Nobody." A pause. "You hear me?" "I hear you." "Not one soul, Darius." "I know." "Good." Another pause, shorter this time. "Call that attorney first thing in the morning. Simone. She'll know what to do, or she'll know who does." He said he would. They stayed on the phone another few minutes without saying much. Odessa asking if he was all right. Darius saying he was. Both of them understanding that all right was doing a lot of work in that sentence. Then she told him to try to sleep. He told her he'd try. He didn't sleep. He called Simone at 7:52 the next morning, 4 minutes before her office opened. She called back at 8:03. He told her what he had. Not the amount. Not yet. Not over the phone. But enough. Unclaimed lottery ticket. Significant sum. Needed to know the right steps immediately. Simone didn't waste a breath on congratulations. She asked 3 questions. Had he told anyone? Had he signed anything? Had he contacted the lottery commission? No, and no. Good, she said. Same word Odessa had used, same tone. Don't move yet. I'm going to give you 2 names. You call them today. The first name was a lottery attorney, a man named Gerald Park, who worked out of a firm in Buckhead and had handled 7 major jackpot claims in the past decade. The second was a financial advisor, a woman named Constance Dupree, who specialized in sudden wealth structuring. Simone had worked with both of them before. She trusted both of them. Call Gerald first, Simone said, before you make any other move. Darius wrote both names on his legal pad, tore the sheet out, folded it, and put it in his shirt pocket. The week that followed moved fast and deliberate, the way the most important weeks always do when you're inside them. Gerald Park was exactly what Simone had promised: thorough, methodical, and constitutionally unbothered by large numbers. He set up the claim through a limited liability company, documents drafted and filed within 48 hours. Darius chose the lump sum. After federal taxes, the figure that landed in the LLC's account was approximately $413 million. Gerald said the number the same way he might have said the weather. Calm, informational, nothing to get worked up about. Constance Dupree moved the funds in stages, structured and sheltered in a way that made the visible portion of Darius's wealth look significantly smaller than the total. She was precise and a little quiet, the kind of woman who said everything she needed to say and nothing she didn't. The claim was sealed from public record for as long as the commission's rules permitted. Darius went back to work the Monday after it all closed, ate lunch at his desk, checked his engineering specs, answered his emails, went home to his apartment off Cascade Road, and heated up leftover rice on the stove. He told no one. The Lottery Commission required a press conference. There was no way around it. The rules were clear, attendance was mandatory, and Gerald had negotiated every concession available, which wasn't many. They would not release Darius's address. They would not detail the claim structure. But his name and his face were going out. He wore a plain dark suit he'd owned for years. No tie. He stood at the podium where they told him to stand, held the ceremonial check where they told him to hold it, and looked into the cameras with the same expression he used when he was reviewing a load-bearing calculation. Present, steady, giving nothing extra away. The whole thing lasted 11 minutes. He was back in his car by noon. That evening he sat on his couch with a bowl of soup and the small television on the cardboard box. The local news ran the segment just after 6. There was his face, the suit, the check with the number printed in large red digits. His phone lit up 47 minutes into the broadcast. Patricia Cole on the screen. The name sitting there like something he'd been expecting and still didn't want to touch. Darius looked at it, let it ring, watched her name glow and pulse, and finally go still. Then he set the phone face down on the cushion beside him and finished his soup. He called her back the next morning at 9. She answered before the second ring. Darius. Her voice was warm, soft in a way he hadn't heard in years. I'm so glad you called. Patricia. He kept his voice level. How are you? Honestly? A small pause, like she was deciding whether to be vulnerable. She had always been good at that pause. I've been worried about you. Since the whole... She let the sentence trail off. I just wanted to know you were okay. He didn't say anything. I saw it on the news, she continued. And I know we're not. I know things ended the way they did. But you're still someone I care about. That doesn't just stop. I understand, Darius said. Does it feel real yet? Something like that? I can't even imagine. It's getting there. Another pause. This one more careful. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Darius. About us. About how things went. I think... She stopped. Started again. I think the divorce was a mistake. I panicked. I let myself get pulled in a direction that... It wasn't right. And I know that's hard to hear this late. Darius looked at his legal pad on the kitchen table. A fresh page. Blank. I hear you, Pat, he said. They talked for another few minutes. He agreed to coffee. She suggested a place in Midtown. Neutral, quiet, a cafe with small tables and soft lighting that would have felt romantic in different circumstances. He said that was fine. They settled on Thursday at 11. When he hung up, he sat for a moment. Then he picked up his pen and wrote one word at the top of the fresh page. Thursday. He arrived at the cafe 12 minutes early and chose a corner table with his back to the wall. She walked in right on time, which itself told him something. Patricia was never punctual unless she needed something. She had dressed carefully. A cream blouse, tailored. Simple gold earrings. The makeup was softer than she usually wore, her hair natural and pulled back. She looked approachable. She looked like a woman who wanted to be seen as someone who had let her guard down. He stood when she reached the table. Old habit. You look good, she said. She meant it. He could tell. The money wasn't visible yet, but something else was. The particular ease of a man who had stopped carrying weight he'd been carrying for years. You too, he said. Sit down. They ordered. She got a latte. He got black coffee. She smiled at that like it meant something. She talked. He listened. She talked about the marriage the way a person talks about a car accident they feel they caused. Careful, remorseful, just enough accountability to seem honest without conceding anything specific. She talked about how she had lost herself in the business, how the pressure had warped her perspective, how Foster had turned out to be someone she didn't expect. She didn't detail that last part. She kept it vague and let him fill in the blanks. She was good at that, always had been, leaving spaces shaped exactly like the answer she wanted you to arrive at. She talked about starting over. She talked about what they could still build. She mentioned the business once, briefly, as something that had become more stressful than rewarding. Darius listened to all of it, and while he listened, he asked questions. What are you thinking you want your life to look like? Said quietly, like concern. Is the firm going the direction you wanted? Leaned forward slightly, like interest. Where do things stand with Foster right now? Asked gently, like he just wanted to understand. She answered the first two carefully. On the third one, she went still for just a breath, barely visible, and then said things had run their course with Foster, that she'd realized what she had walked away from. She kept her eyes on him when she said it. He nodded slowly, like he was taking it in. He was taking it in. Just not the way she thought. By the end of the meeting, he knew three things. She was aware of the LLC structure around his winnings, though not the full amount. She believed the version of Darius she had always known was still completely intact, accommodating, fair to a fault, susceptible to history. And whatever was happening with Foster had rattled her enough that she was moving faster than she'd originally planned. He walked her to her car. She hugged him. He let her. Then he got in his own car and called Simone Wade. I need you to pull the divorce decree, he said. Specifically the asset disclosure affidavits. I want to know what the penalty exposure looks like, if those numbers were fraudulent. Simone was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. How fraudulent are we talking? I don't know yet, Darius said, but enough that someone chose those numbers very deliberately. I'll pull it today, she said. Wendell called at 7:40 that evening. Darius was at his kitchen table eating a sandwich when the phone buzzed. He wiped his hand and answered. Wendell didn't do small talk when the news was significant. He said, I've been going through the firm's vendor invoices, cross-referenced them against public contractor filings. Darius set the sandwich down. Foster's development company was funneling contracts to Patricia's firm, Wendell said. Not recently, going back almost 2 years before the divorce was filed. Consistent, patterned, and deliberately structured to avoid triggering reporting thresholds. He paused. Darius, that business was not worth $180,000 at the time of the divorce. What was it worth? Closer to $620,000, Wendell said. Maybe more, depending on how you account for the forward contracts. Darius was quiet. You still there? Wendell asked. I'm here. He reached for his legal pad, uncapped his pen. Don't stop looking. I won't. He set the phone down. At the top of a fresh page, in clean, even numbers, he wrote $620,000. Then he underlined it. Twice. Darius called Wendell back at 9 the following morning. Keep going, he said. Anything connected to Foster's company, anything connected to the firm's contracts, anything that touched that business in the 2 years before she filed, all of it. Already on it, Wendell said. That was the end of the conversation. That was how they worked. He called Simone at 9:15. She picked up on the first ring. He laid out what Wendell had found. The vendor invoices, the contractor filings, the 2 years of structured payments that had quietly tripled the firm's value before Patricia's attorney submitted an affidavit swearing it was worth $180,000. Simone was quiet the whole time he spoke. Not the kind of quiet that meant she was lost. The kind that meant she was already building something in her head. When he finished, she said, Say that number again. 620,000, Darius said. Possibly more. She exhaled slowly. Then we have fraud upon the court. That's not a civil dispute over methodology. That's a deliberately false sworn statement, submitted to influence the outcome of a legal proceeding. She paused. Darius, I can file a motion to vacate the entire decree. I know, he said. Don't file yet. A beat. How long do you need? I'll tell you when. All right, she said. He could hear the restraint in her voice, the professional discipline of a woman who wanted to move right now and was choosing not to. I'll build it. Quietly. Everything will be ready when you say go. That's what I need, he said. Wendell's documentation, she said. I want all of it. Originals where possible, certified copies where not. And I want a forensic accountant, not Wendell, someone I retain independently, to verify the valuation. When this goes in front of a judge, I want the numbers to be airtight. Whatever you need, Darius said. He hung up and wrote Simone, motion to vacate in the margin of his legal pad. Then he circled it. His financial advisor, a man named Gerald Price, who wore reading glasses on a chain and spoke in the measured tones of someone who had seen people ruin themselves with sudden money, came to his apartment that Thursday with a leather portfolio and a proposal. Gerald laid it out across the kitchen table, piece by piece. The Lottery Commission had disclosed the jackpot publicly. Anyone with a calculator could estimate the lump sum, subtract federal taxes, and arrive at a rough number, somewhere in the range of 200 to 250 million, most people would guess. That number was real. It was just not complete. The actual total, properly distributed across the LLC structure Gerald had designed, accounts, instruments, and holdings that were legally sound and individually unremarkable, was larger. Not dramatically, but meaningfully. The visible portion of Darius's wealth, the part that anyone asking questions would be able to see or estimate, was a fraction of the real picture. The rest was simply elsewhere, held inside structures that were clean, documented, and entirely his. Anyone negotiating against you, Gerald said, setting his glasses down on the table, will be negotiating against a number they don't have. Darius looked at the documents spread across the table. Good, he said. He signed where Gerald indicated. Gerald packed up his portfolio and left. Darius made a fresh pot of coffee and stood at his kitchen window for a while, watching the parking lot below without really seeing it. 3 days later, he made one more move. Through the LLC, he purchased the building that housed Patricia's interior design firm. It was a 2-story commercial property in a quiet stretch of Buckhead. Brick exterior, recently updated HVAC, 8 units, 6 occupied. Patricia's firm was on the ground floor. The listing price was fair. Darius paid it without negotiating, which was unusual enough that the seller's agent mentioned it. The transaction closed in 11 days. Clean paperwork, no flags. Darius received the deed on a Wednesday afternoon. He read through the full document, checked the address twice out of habit, and filed it in a folder at the back of his desk drawer. Patricia was paying rent to his LLC now. Had been, technically, since the closing date. She didn't know it yet. Aunt Odessa called on a Sunday. She started with small talk. Her granddaughter's school play, a neighbor's new dog that barked too much. Darius sat on his couch and listened, knowing from 44 years of experience that Odessa always arrived at the point in her own time. She got there about 8 minutes in. "I ran into Brenda," Odessa said. "You remember Brenda Lattimore? Used to work over at that insurance company, the one you had your policy through." Darius straightened slightly. "I remember the name. We had lunch after church. She retired last year." Odessa paused. "Baby, she told me something." He waited. 18 months before Patricia filed for divorce. Odessa said, slow and even, like she was reading from something, "Patricia tried to have you removed as the policy manager on your life insurance. The $1.2 million policy." She filled out the paperwork herself. Darius said nothing. "The request was denied," Odessa continued. "Procedural error on the form. It never went through. And Patricia never tried again." Another pause. Brenda said she'd always felt uneasy about it. Said she never forgot it because the beneficiary change request came in the same week. Darius was very still. "You there?" Odessa asked. "I'm here," he said. "Aunt Odessa, I need Brenda's number." He got off the phone with Odessa and sat quietly for a moment. Then he went to his desk, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out the folder. He placed it on the table and added the notes he had written during the call. Brenda's name, the timeline, the policy number, the procedural denial. He paperclipped them to the back of the existing documents. He looked at the file for a moment. Then he closed it, turned off the kitchen light, and went to bed. The birthday party was in Odessa's backyard. The same backyard Darius had run through as a boy, back when the oak tree in the corner was half its current size, and the fence was white instead of gray. Odessa had strung paper lanterns between the posts, and a folding table near the back door held a sheet cake decorated with purple frosting, and a plastic ballerina frozen mid-spin on top. His cousin's daughter, Maya, had just turned 7. She was running in circles with 2 other girls, screaming about nothing in particular, full of the specific joy that belongs only to children who don't know yet that the world will ever ask anything difficult of them. Darius stood near the oak tree with a cup of sweet tea and watched her run. He had been there 40 minutes when the back gate opened. He saw Odessa register it first. She was standing near the cake table talking to a woman from her church, and something shifted in her face. Small, controlled, visible only to someone who had known her as long as Darius had. She turned toward the gate with an expression that took about a half-second to complete its transformation into a warm smile. And then Patricia was walking across the grass in a sundress and wedge sandals, carrying a small gift bag with tissue paper blooming out of the top. She had not been invited. Odessa met her halfway across the yard. "Patricia?" Odessa's voice was smooth and full as a hymn. She took both of Patricia's hands in hers. "What a nice surprise! Come on, let me get you something to drink." Patricia smiled the smile she wore when she was pleased with herself. "I heard about Maya's party, and I just couldn't stay away. I still think of myself as family." "Of course you do," Odessa said, and guided her gently but firmly toward the drink table. away from where Darius was standing. He watched it happen. Odessa moved the way a woman moves when she has already decided the outcome and is simply managing the path to it. Unhurried, gracious, warm in a way that contained no actual welcome. Patricia, who was skilled at reading rooms, did not read this one. She was too focused on the man by the oak tree. Their eyes met across the yard. She found him alone near the back fence 20 minutes later. "I thought you might be here," she said. "It's my aunt's house," he said. She stood beside him and looked out at Maya running in the grass. For a moment, neither of them spoke, and it felt almost ordinary. Two people watching a child's birthday party. The late afternoon light going amber in the oak leaves above them. Almost. "I know about the LLC," Patricia said. She kept her voice low, conversational. "I know you have advisors. I know you've been careful." She turned to look at him. "I'm not trying to catch you in anything, Darius. I'm just being honest with you." He looked at her. He didn't say anything. "You built a structure," she said. "I respect that. That's you. That has always been you. Careful. Thorough." She paused. "But I know you. You're too fair to cut me out completely. We built something together. Whatever else happened. That counts for something." He let her finish. He let the silence sit for a moment after she finished, long enough that she shifted her weight slightly on the grass. Then he said, "You're right. I am fair." He looked at her evenly. "I want you to know that about me going in." Patricia's expression opened. The careful composure softened at the edges. Something that looked like relief, or the performance of it, and with Patricia he had stopped being certain there was a difference, moved across her face. "That's all I'm asking," she said. "Just a conversation. A real one." "I hear you," he said. She smiled. She touched his arm briefly, the way she used to when she thought she had won an argument, and then excused herself to go say goodbye to Odessa. He watched her walk back across the yard. He watched Odessa accept her hug with both arms and a wide smile, and see her all the way to the gate, and then watch her go. The message from Wendell arrived at 11:47 that night. Title search came back. "Look at the attachment." Darius opened it at the kitchen table. It was a deed. The family home. The 4-bedroom house in the suburb of Atlanta that Patricia had told the court she could not imagine her life without. The home she had described, through her attorney, as her emotional foundation, her primary residence, the irreplaceable center of her stability. Her name was on the deed. So was Foster Briggs's. The transfer date was 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized. Darius read the document twice. Then he set his phone down, picked it back up, and photographed every page. He printed the images from his small desk printer, the machine humming quietly in the otherwise silent apartment, and added the pages to the back of the folder. He sat down at the kitchen table, pulled his legal pad in front of him. He wrote the date at the top of a fresh page. Below it, 2 words, Phase 1. The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday. Patricia signed for it herself at the front door, still in her robe, coffee in hand. The envelope was thick, cream-colored. The return address was a law firm she recognized, Simone Wade's office. She had seen that name on documents before. Back when Darius was just the man on the other side of a negotiating table, she was certain she had already won. She set her coffee down before she finished reading the first page. By the second page, she was sitting on the floor of her entryway. Motion to vacate divorce decree, based on fraud upon the court. The exhibits were attached in order, tabbed and labeled with the kind of care that told her someone had been building this for a long time. The business valuation discrepancy, the vendor contracts, an affidavit from a forensic accountant whose name she didn't recognize. A formal demand for full financial disclosure within 30 days. She called Foster first. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. She sent a text that said, "Call me right now," and watched the screen for 3 minutes. Nothing. She called her divorce attorney. He told her, carefully, that this was outside his area. He gave her 2 names. She had a new attorney by Thursday. The meeting was offered through Simone's office. 1 session. In person. Attorneys present. No Foster Briggs. Those were the terms, delivered in 2 sentences by Simone's paralegal over the phone. Patricia's new attorney called Simone directly to negotiate the conditions. Simone told him, politely, that the conditions were not negotiable, and that if Patricia preferred to skip the meeting, the filing would proceed to court that same afternoon. Patricia agreed. Simone Wade's conference room was on the 14th floor of a building in Midtown Atlanta, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over a stretch of the city, going gray-green under an overcast sky. The table was long, dark wood, very clean. A pitcher of water sat in the center. 2 legal pads, a row of pens. Darius arrived first. He sat with his back to the windows and his hands flat on the table, and he waited, the way a man waits when he has already done everything that needed doing, and the outcome is simply a matter of time. Patricia came in with her attorney, a compact man named Gerald, with silver hair and a careful expression that told Darius he had already advised his client to say as little as possible. Patricia sat across from Darius and placed her hands in her lap and looked at him. He looked back. Simone opened the meeting with the formal framing, the legal grounds, the documentation, the range of outcomes. Gerald responded with the expected language about contesting the motion and questioning the admissibility of certain exhibits. Simone let him finish. Then she said, calmly, that the forensic accountant's affidavit had already been submitted for court review, and that Mr. Cole was prepared to proceed to full litigation at his discretion. Then Darius spoke. He didn't look at Gerald. He looked at Patricia. "I want to walk through the timeline," he said. "Not for the attorneys, for you." Patricia's jaw tightened slightly. She nodded once. He started 2 years before the divorce. Foster Briggs's development company. The contracts that began flowing to her design firm, quietly, steadily, routed through vendor arrangements that didn't show up on the surface financials. He named the dollar amounts. He named the dates. He watched her face while he spoke, and saw the small, controlled flinch when he cited a figure she hadn't expected him to have. He moved to the business valuation, the one her attorney submitted to the court. $180,000. He let that number sit in the room for a moment. Then he said the actual number, $620,000, and watched her look briefly at the table. Then the insurance policy, the attempt to remove him as manager, 18 months before she filed for divorce, the procedural error that stopped it. He told her he knew she hadn't been impulsive. He told her he knew she had been planning in multiple directions for years, and that he respected, in a purely technical sense, the patience it took. Then, the deed. He slid the copy across the table. Patricia didn't pick it up. She didn't need to. She already knew what it said. 3 weeks after you told a court that house was your emotional foundation, Darius said, you put his name on it. The room was quiet. What I want is straightforward, he said. The business comes back to me at full valuation. The house goes to market, and we split the proceeds down the middle, the way it should have been from the start. Foster's name comes off the deed before it lists. He paused. You do those things within 45 days, and I won't pursue criminal fraud charges. I also won't deliver my documentation to the Real Estate Commission, the same commission that is currently investigating Foster's company, the company your firm's contracts run through. Gerald leaned toward Patricia and said something low. She didn't respond to him. She was looking at Darius. Can we take 5 minutes? Gerald said. Take 10, Simone said. Gerald stood. Patricia didn't move. After a moment, she said, Is any part of you doing this because you still love me? Darius looked at her. He let the question settle honestly, the way she had asked it, without contempt, without rushing past it. I loved you for 18 years, he said. But you made your choices long before I sat down at this table. I'm not doing this for love. I'm doing this because I earned everything you tried to take, and I intend to have it back." Gerald returned. There was a short, quiet exchange between the two attorneys. Patricia signed the preliminary agreement before she left the building. The 45 days began on a Wednesday. Darius didn't count them out loud. He didn't mark a calendar. He simply went back to work, back to his engineering projects, his morning coffee, his legal pad, and let the clock run the way a clock does when the mechanism is already set and all that's left is time. He heard about Foster first. It came through Wendell, which was how most things came to Darius, quietly, accurately, without drama. Wendell called on a Thursday evening, 2 weeks into the window, and delivered the information the way he always did. Facts first, no editorializing. Foster had contacted the Real Estate Commission's investigators directly. His attorney had likely advised against it. Or maybe Foster was the kind of man who believed he could talk his way through anything because he always had before. He went in thinking he was getting ahead of the problem. Instead, he answered questions about specific contract dates and vendor arrangements in a way that confirmed details the investigators had been unable to prove on their own. He gave them the thread. They pulled it. Darius listened to all of this without speaking. "He handed them the case," Wendell said. "Yeah," Darius said. "He did." He didn't say anything else about it. He thanked Wendell and hung up and sat for a moment in the particular quiet of a man watching something fall that he didn't have to push. Word travels fast in Atlanta's real estate community. It always has. The city is big in geography and small in memory, and the people who build things and sell things and design the interiors of things all know each other in the way that matters, through deals, through referrals, through the careful accumulation of reputation over years. Patricia's 2 largest clients didn't cancel with hostility. There were no angry calls, no formal letters of complaint. The contracts simply didn't renew. One client cited a change in project direction. The other stopped returning her project manager's emails. Both decisions came within 10 days of each other, and Patricia had to know what they meant, even if no one said it plainly. The revenue those 2 clients represented was close to 40% of the firm's annual billings. Then, on day 26, Patricia received a letter from the building management office. Her lease was expiring in 90 days. The renewal rate had been adjusted to current market value. The new number was 62% higher than what she had been paying. She would have known at some point that Darius owned the building. Maybe she figured it out when she saw the LLC name on the letter. Maybe she had known for a while and simply hadn't found the right time to be angry about it. Either way, she called his number. He let it go to voicemail. There was nothing to say that wasn't already in writing. She began looking for a smaller space. There wasn't one in that neighborhood she could afford. The house sold on day 31. The market had shifted just enough that the number came in lower than Patricia had been counting on. Not dramatically, just enough to matter. Her half of the proceeds, after the mortgage payoff and closing costs, was enough to cover a security deposit and several months of rent somewhere modest. Not enough to start over. Not enough to rebuild. Foster's name was removed from the deed 4 days before closing, per the agreement. His attorney handled it. Foster himself was, by that point, managing the consequences of a settlement with the Real Estate Commission that included a civil monetary penalty, a suspended real estate license, and legal fees that required him to list 2 of his development properties for sale. His name appeared in the Atlanta Business Chronicle 11 days after the settlement, a brief item, factual and unsparing, in the regulatory actions column. His relationship with Patricia had already ended by then. Wendell heard from someone who had been present that it concluded in a parking lot argument outside a restaurant in Buckhead. What was said didn't matter. What mattered was that it was loud enough to be remembered. Darius heard this and noted it with the same neutrality he brought to all of it. It wasn't satisfaction, exactly. It was closer to the feeling of watching a structure that was never built right finally settle into what it always was. The business transferred to Darius on day 43. 6 months later, he was sitting on a porch. It was a wide porch, wide enough for 3 rocking chairs and a small table, on a craftsman house in the southwest part of Atlanta, where the streets were shaded by old oak trees that had been growing longer than any of the houses beside them. He had paid cash. He had chosen it because it reminded him of his grandmother's house, and because the first time he stood on that porch and looked out at the yard, he felt, very simply, like himself. Wendell was there. Aunt Odessa was there. The 3 of them had sweet tea and the easy silence of people who have been through something real together and landed somewhere worth landing. Odessa looked out at the yard for a long moment. Then she said, "Your mother would have liked this porch." Darius looked at the oak trees. "I bought it thinking that." Wendell didn't say anything. He just took a slow sip of his tea and leaned back in his chair, and the afternoon settled around the 3 of them like it had nowhere else to be. Later, after Wendell and Odessa had gone, Darius sat alone. The sun was going down behind the oaks, breaking into long orange pieces through the branches. Somewhere down the street, a child was laughing at something. A dog barked once and went quiet. The air smelled like cut grass and late summer and the particular cleanness of a place that had not yet accumulated any bad memories. Darius sat with his hands loose in his lap and watched the light change in the trees. He wasn't planning anything. He wasn't rebuilding anything. He wasn't waiting for the next piece of information or the next call or the next document that would confirm what he already knew. He was just there, on his porch, in his yard, in a life that belonged completely and without argument to him. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day.